Welcome everyone to the second ever episode of the Pyramid Pod. I'm your host, Braden Lockwood.
I'm your co-host, Elizabeth Sloan.
And today we have a very special guest, my man, Deep Prasad.
Hey, thanks, Braden. I'm really happy to be here.
Yes, we're excited to have you on. So why don't we start by just having you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and kind of what you're up to these days.
Sure. Okay. So my background is kind of very varied. I started out in the entrepreneurship tech world very early. I started my first company when I was 17, did startups all the way throughout my undergrad in engineering. And then at some point within my last year of my undergrad, I got deeply obsessed with quantum mechanics. So, I was really obsessed with the philosophy, the history of physics, because like once you start reading about the sort of mental battles that like Einstein, Feynman, and Bohr were going through, it's crazy because like they touch into not only the mathematics but the true nature of reality was like up for debate, right? So you got to imagine like the environment. You're in the World War era, and you have like just this like crazy intense vibe of discovery about nature. So I got really obsessed with that, and then eventually I started getting, I guess, decently good at quantum mechanics, like on the mathematical side. And I ran into this sort of moral dilemma, or a dilemma, really. It wasn't a moral dilemma, but I had a return offer at the Royal Bank of Canada to be the head of their artificial intelligence division. And I took them up on that offer as once I graduated. So I was there, and in the back of my mind, I was constantly thinking about quantum mechanics and just like the things that actually truly, interested me.
Once the seed's been planted, it's hard to shake what you're really passionate about.
So true. Exactly. Exactly. And I'm not the type to like be able to shut that down, right? Like shut that voice out. Like I'll just be demotivated. You know what I mean? And I saw that coming. Like I was like, there's no way I can do this job like every day, despite having respect, money, whatever, everything that like my classmates dreamed about just was not good enough. And so at the same time, I had met somebody who is one of the let's say the father of multiple fields within quantum computing. He's like the leading scientist in the subject. I ran into him. I was actually doing a podcast for my own science selective, and I cold called the Institute for Quantum Computing, and I asked them, is anybody working on the intersection of quantum mechanics and artificial intelligence, right? Because that's my expertise, but I don't know anything about quantum mechanics. And so they connect me to this person, and he ended up very much inspiring me and convincing me that I should apply to the world's first quantum computing incubator. And now the challenge was that this incubator was only accepting masters and PhDs in physics. I had an undergrad in engineering, totally not qualified, at least at that level. But because I'd been studying, like truly studying this subject for like a year or so, I managed to prove that I had enough knowledge to get in. And so before I, got into the program, on day 4 of my job at Royal Bank of Canada, the application for the program was due. So I go up to my boss and I tell him that I'm quitting, and I left my job on day 4. Didn't tell my parents anything. Worked on the application, and then a few days later I told them, yeah, I don't work here anymore. And so for like 3 months straight, I was in so much trouble, and I was taking so much flack for that decision. But I don't regret it at all, because from then on, I started my quantum computing company, which I've been doing for 3 years now. And we do research in material science. So material science discovery currently is done very primitively. It's actually more or less done in the same way that we've been doing materials discovery since mankind, really, since the existence. So consider, for example, finding the next plastic or the next battery or the next solar cells. All of these things takes millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, to do, right? And the reason why is because it's been impossible to predict what material properties your material will have before you actually go out and buy those materials, right? And then manufacture them. That's what we're changing with quantum computers. So we figured out a way to automate that process where, let's say you have a new battery design or a new semiconductor design. we can actually simulate that without you having to spend millions of dollars doing it. And so we're perfecting that technology, and we're trying to focus it and improve it onto materials that matter, materials that will change the world. So yeah, that's what I do.
That's awesome. My roommate is actually, he just changed his master's to get it in quantum computing because he's really
Awesome. Good for him.
And yeah, so it sounds like you were mostly self-taught in quantum mechanics. You just taught yourself off the internet, or how did you?
Exactly. Yeah, I read tons of textbooks. I watched videos like lectures. The MIT coursewares are really good for that. There's a bunch of lecture series that they publish. So it's a great head start that anyone can have, right? Like anyone can teach themselves if they're willing to. I should also mention though, at some point about 6 months into starting my quantum computing company, I got really obsessed with UFOs. Like I was literally the word wasn't even on my mind. Like I had absolutely no interest, but for whatever reason, one day I just woke up. Like it's crazy. One day I wake up and I'm like, why did the New York Times cover UFOs? Like this was like peak. I'm trying to start my business off the ground, like learning quantum computing, starting my PhDs. And yeah, this is the question on my mind. Like, wait a minute, there's something anomalous about that. So I dug deep into it. And then, I started doing some research on the side. I anonymously started interacting with people in the UFO community because like there was no way I could reveal my identity at the time. Like too many people's eyes were on me, like
Yeah.
seeing what I'm gonna do, right? So I was already like a risky investment to like my investors. So like yeah, I was kind of playing low profile, and then eventually around 3.5 to 4 months into my investigations, I ended up having an experience that changed my life. And that's like we can get into it later, but I had my own run-ins with the phenomenon, let's just call it that. This happened in the daytime, right, during my like just during regular work hours, in my room, mind you. But yeah, it was something that I thought I just was impossible. If anybody had told me that like this is gonna happen, I would have said that's physically impossible. You know what I mean? It's just a story.
No, we it sounds like we had a very similar like
Tell me about it.
timeline of our lives, because around junior senior year of my engineering undergrad, it was also the time when I was less Bohr and Einstein, more into Nikola Tesla and his work.
Nice.
But same thing. I eventually the seed got planted of like, what is up with these UFOs?
Fascinating.
What is like coming into our reality? Why? How? Why is it being hidden? Like all these questions, and I just couldn't shake my own curiosity about it. And I found the same thing as you. Like I had my first like UFO experience like 2 to 3 months after I started really getting into
Fascinating.
research.
And you're not alone, by the way. It's almost like there's this saying like when you study this phenomenon, it studies you back.
Yes.
I truly
Yeah.
believe that's kind of happening to some extent.
That,
Funny that you guys had that experience where you kind of manifested it into your reality, because I was the opposite. Things happened to me and it made me question to have to then look into it.
Wow.
Um,
So how did you deal with that? I mean, like, yeah.
Great question. So I think I had my first experience when I was about 7 or 8. Um, I was about to go to bed, so I had my eyes closed, and I was immediately shooting through space, and I met these beings who were about 8, 9 feet tall, dark blue skin. Their skull was upwards, and they all took a knee around me, and I said, "Wow, it feels good to be home."
That's
And
great.
I grew up in a household where things like that didn't exist. Very
Right.
messianic Christian,
Wow.
so very Jewish, very Christian. Aliens weren't a thing unless you were calling them angels, I suppose.
True.
So having to look into that and defacing a lot of personal beliefs that I had been conditioned into since birth in order to do some research. Um, it caused a lot of internal turmoil because I kept wondering, where did these things in my brain come from? I've definitely encountered, I know that owls have a lot to do with
Yeah.
these experiences and encounters. Uh, there was a point in time, a junior in high school, I had a dream where I basically was taken into a black Cadillac Escalade with someone else from my school, and the driver in this in this vehicle had sunglasses on at night, black suit,
Yeah.
everything like that.
Dang.
And he wouldn't respond when I would knock on the window, separating the driver in the back seat. I said, "Where are we going?" And he just would ignore me. Took me to the shed that was on the water, kind of like a parking place for jet skis or something. And it was empty. It was a full moon. The light illuminating onto the water made it so bright, but the water was black. Needless to say, by the end of the dream, what I think was a dream, now I'm not so sure, because lots of downloads happened in a single night of symbology I wasn't even aware of at that point in time. And I met these, a lot of them, about 15 owls that were about 6 foot tall.
That's
And they were
crazy.
perching everywhere inside this shed. And it felt like they were trying to speak to me. And when I woke up from that dream, I had to do dream interpretation research to see what owls meant. And it kept saying things about you've been met by some extraterrestrials, or you found a tether between other worlds. And that's what really tore me open into new experiences, and having to deeply consider the fact that life outside of our planet is entirely too possible.
Right. Absolutely.
And Elizabeth, that's actually kind of a good segue into something that I wanted to talk about today, which is like how you see aliens and this like influx of new information. How do you see it interacting with religious study? Like I know a lot of people that like consider themselves followers of certain religions that have no issues whatsoever with ET, and they actually they reference their own texts as ETs, and that's how they interpret some of their writings. Right. And then other people have a much more like once you identify as a certain religion, you might discard all belief in aliens and in preference of a more simplified biblical story of this universe.
Yeah, it's a great segue. So Deep, just to let you know that my my undergraduate degree is in ancient civilizations and the fine arts. So I focus in on the phenomenological and anthropological history of ancient religions and how they kind of meet and how they discord. So I definitely have done a lot of research into seeing how these how these people all across the planet have similar experiences, encounters, similar stories about what they went through, similar descriptions, during a time when supposedly there was no communication from such proximal places away from each other.
Like, what's an example that stands out to you?
A great example would be, so ancient India has a lot of discussion about flying chariots. So high advanced technology, people coming from the heavens through India. Definitely a lot in Sanskrit that I haven't been able to translate myself, but I know that there's so much in there that is available if you're able to get through that language. And that connecting to similar stories in the Old Testament of the Bible, and also in ancient Egypt. So there seems to be a pattern within these in the southern hemisphere of the planet. But then you also have some in ancient, like in the Nordic places, of their high technology, of their ability to transport places,
and
having different portals.
You see it in South America too, with the Mayans.
Good point.
Yeah, apparently I don't want to skip all the way, a couple 8,000 years ahead, but I know that there are people who claim that they're part of secret space programs that say that there are a lot of Mayan civilizations who left our planet in particular and continued on their culture into space, and they use spaceships that look like logs.
I've seen like pictures, the hieroglyphs of them in the log spaceships, and I know that's one of the mysteries of our history is kind of what happened to the Mayan civilization.
Right.
Because they seem to just disappear at the peak of their existence, and they didn't really find a bunch of mass burial sites or
That's right.
whatnot. So that's
A
definitely
whole civilization, I think, back in 2014 or 15, um, was found completely intact in South America not too long ago, right? So completely covered over. Looks like it was just abandoned, and
Yeah,
it
wow.
barely hit the news. Yeah.
There's a point there to be said about how our own technology, as it advances, it gives us better insight into these historical cultures and the ones that might have just been erased from history totally, right? Like
Mhm.
that's a great example. That was due, I think, thanks to LiDAR technologies. And so as we're moving forward, there's something called, there's a sister technology to quantum computing called quantum sensors. And so one of my favorite examples of quantum sensor is a quantum magnetometer. The first like commercial one that's like really useful was built by Lockheed, and it's called the Dark Ice magnetometer. It is so sensitive to magnetic fields that it can pick up the micro teslas of the Earth's magnetic field even beyond. Yeah, exactly. It can filter that through all of the noise and all the electromagnetic noise around it, so you can navigate the Earth without a GPS. You can go
Wow.
anywhere you want. Yeah, you can be underwater without GPS and you know exactly where you are. So
Incredible.
right? And it's all because of the fact that it's sensing quanta. And so if you think about the application of that, there's another one called quantum gravitometers. Now, those are not in existence yet. There would be a very advanced technology that we haven't quite mastered the engineering behind, but we understand the physics like of how it would work. And so a quantum gravitometer would, in theory, detect gravitons. And gravitons have yet to be proven to exist. Like there's still a big debate on whether they exist or not. But that being said, if you can detect the quanta of the gravitational field, I would be able to stick my little quantum gravitometer. Let's say I'm in Vancouver, right? So I go to White Rock Beach and I just stick it there. I would be able to pick up the movements of a whale in the Indian Ocean. So I would know exactly what it's doing. And any fish, anything, any physical body in the ocean, I would be able to capture their momenta because they leave a specific unique signal, right? Every object. So the brilliant thing about this is, though, it'll also let us easily penetrate through miles underneath the Earth and see everything down to like granularity. I could tell you if there's an ant, 10 miles underground and what it's doing with a quantum gravitometer. So imagine the hidden secrets that Earth still has that we'll be able to probe.
Oh, that is phenomenal. I can't believe that's something that we're able to tap into. And the fact that we're able to tap into it now makes you question um, the potential that maybe that was being able to be done earlier in time as well. And it makes me wonder as well. Um, so I'm sure that you're quite aware, Deep, of the biomagnetism of the singular individual body
Yeah.
compared to the planet. Do you think that this technology could sense different people's auras depending on how strong they are, or how the energy around their body and their personal torsion field is vibrating outwards?
So definitely everybody has a unique magnetic field around them that is their signature. And we would absolutely be able to pick that apart with quantum magnetometers. And now whether that magnetic field couples to a person's, let's say, aura or their spirit, that's like, that's a question that you and Braden will have to answer. I have no idea about that.
Let's say that there is a child who goes missing, right? Could we use this technology to then record their signature somehow? Maybe I mean, I feel like that'd be a great breach in privacy at a young age, and I'm sure that the signatures change throughout time for that person. But if somehow we could record their signature, we could find them somewhere on the planet or even off planet if they go missing.
So here, that's a great question. There's two examples that I think one we can probably realize fairly soon enough, maybe even a decade or so, which is quantum phonon sensors. So all of sound is based on phonons, right? Just like, so those are the quanta of the oscillation of sound. And so phonons, if you could pick them up, which we can, you would be able to stick like a quantum phonon sensor into the ground. Let's say an earthquake happened and a building collapsed, there's rubble, and let's say a little baby is like stuck underneath the rubble. Right now, and you can't hear them. A quantum phonon sensor will pick up its heartbeat and it'll tell you exactly where it is. So we could use that kind of technology, right, to recover missing children if they're stuck or they're missing because of natural disasters. Now, let's say somebody's nefarious and they're like, well, you know what? Screw your quantum sensor. We're gonna cage this kid, and like you can't pick apart the phonon signal. Let's say you have a real adversary, a supervillain, whatever. There are even more powerful sensors out there that simply cannot be easily skirted around. For example, quantum gravitons. You can't really mask that. You would need something bigger than a planet to mask your gravitational signal. There's this other technology, though, worth talking about, and it's being developed right now. The only institute I know that's developing it, I think, is Caltech. I have a friend there who's doing his research on it as we speak. It's a very, very, very nascent technology, and it's the idea of being able to read what the brain is doing using photons and non-invasive quantum technologies. So you'll be able to sense, for example, without sticking a neural link in a person's brain, what their brain is doing. And so that's super useful, right? Because I could fly over, let's say, America and just read everybody's brain signals at some point. And I'm convinced that extraterrestrial civilizations already do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what do you make of Elon Musk and Neuralink and all that in context to your work and what you're doing?
Sure. So I think Elon is a huge inspiration. I understand that's not necessarily a popular statement, but yeah, I think I see the drive for innovation in him. I think that he's villainized a bit too often. He started out with the right intents, and I think his technology is about as good as it gets for humans, right? So, for example, I started wondering once I got into UAPs, why is he not trying to create like anti-gravitics? Like, why is he not trying to create UAP level technology?
Luckily.
And the reason that I see is that, frankly, our engineering is not nearly as advanced enough. We don't even have the material science to create those UAPs just yet. So I think, like, if you look at what he's doing from a practical standpoint, he's doing the best with what we have for now, right? Like what we've got. Very practical guy. We can now go to space for 100 times cheaper than ever before. So things like that are great. I think that is good that the private sector is starting to get into space, because I've lost complete trust in NASA and any government organization doing
Yeah, I'm with
anything.
you there, brother.
Right? Like, dude, they're it's pathetic. Like, I will just say that. Like, took us 50 years to go back to the moon. We're still not back there. They are, I'm sure, sitting on secrets, that could very well be useful for the public. But
I think there's a reason that they haven't disclosed more, or at least publicly gone back to the moon. Who knows what they're doing?
Exactly. I think publicly is the key word there. I think that even when it comes to military technology and us giving other countries our technology for a profit, right, some sort of commercialization, we're not going to give them our best pieces. We're going to give them our pieces from like 3 years ago. So who knows what isn't public yet, but that is being made, or that is currently in manufacturing.
yeah, it's a good point. And we know for a fact that classified programs, space missions do exist. I have some friends who have actually worked on such missions. They obviously couldn't tell me details because it's classified, but it is a thing. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if we're secretly sending rockets, to the moon, or even Mars. Who knows?
That'd be a fun
Or
one.
even taking those ships underneath the Earth and the different terraforms that are available that have a different gaseous atmosphere, like pockets throughout the Earth that way. Who knows what we're exploring that way through um, private companies that just don't want to even be public, like Elon Musk, someone else, who knows?
And it's gonna be really interesting, I think, like as all these private companies go explore space and go explore deeper into our own Earth, our oceans, the caverns. It's going to be interesting to watch how people's perception of our government shifts as they realize that like the private industry is more innovative, more cutting edge. I think as you were saying with NASA, like I think it's going to lead to a lot of distrust in our government when we find out the secrets that they've been sitting on top of for so long.
Yeah, it's a good point. It really makes you wonder, how are they going to manage it? And is that lack of management plan slowing down disclosure, for example, right? Like, is that the reason why things are sort of trickling down rather than just somebody opening up, yeah, the door to all these things?
Personally, from an anthropological point of view, I think that if we were to dump all of the information that has been hidden over the past half a century, for
Yeah.
example, that alone, um, a lot of people would be way too emotionally charged, and the download would be too much for them to take in a single dose. Um, and so I think for the integrity of any civilization to continue, you can't completely shift like that, um, and think everything's going to be easy peasy lemon squeezy. I think the point of dropping information is a good idea, but the amount that they've been giving and the quantity and the quality of the information throughout has been a bit selfish, in my opinion. But I do think that there is some integrity with giving drops here and there instead of a massive overload of information.
Do you see one religion trying to dominate this information over another and get ahead of it?
That's a great question. Um, I would say no, because I think no matter the religion,
Yeah.
no matter the culture, they are investigating the technology probably from their ancient religions, and trying to recreate them. You see in CERN, portal technology is something that you see a lot in Nordic, mythology. You see a lot of hidden flying technology in the Southeast Asia. You see a lot of electric things in Africa. Um, and I really don't know much about the Far East, about what technology, but they have the strongest, right? They're the ones that seem to be at the forefront of a lot of evolution when it comes to technology.
Are you talking
Uh,
about China?
yeah, China, Japan, I feel like they really catch on, at least from my point of view. What do you say?
No, that's entirely correct. China by far is kicking our ass in AI, artificial intelligence. They are significantly more organized than any other country I've ever seen when it comes to technology.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't like it for what it's worth. I'll be honest with you because of their methods. But yeah, you're right. Like there's it. By the way, there's interesting overlap though there that I found with them and Sumerians. Some of their kings, or at least one of their kings, was basically a reptilian or they describe it as such, or
Mm-hmm.
him. And I found it fascinating that the way that they describe him is the exact same way the Sumerians describe their leader, which is
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, no, the connections there are insane when it comes to the giants and Nephilim and the way that they're described in ancient hieroglyphs of Egypt or the hieroglyphs of ancient Sumer. There's so many connections there. Braden, say what you need to say.
that's one of the things that hooked me so early
Right.
on, was once I started studying the mythology of all these different cultures, and then realizing that there was so much overlap in their myths, and trying to piece together like what what they were trying to tell us, what messages they were trying to encode, because I do think that when they were inscribing these things in stones and building these truths into the architecture of their buildings,
Yeah.
they were trying to preserve their understandings and their information for future humans to understand.
I absolutely agree with that. That's why I find it ridiculous when we look at like Sumerians as the perfect example. Weren't they? They are, yeah. They were the first civilization that we know of that actually had a grasp of mathematics. They gave us astrophysics, the basics of language, right? So we accept all that, but then we totally ignore what they said about,
Yeah.
alien astronauts, right? Astronauts from the sky who taught them. Like we're like, oh, that's just myths, like those dumb brown people. Like, you know what I mean?
And
It's just funny. It's like it's a crazy level of dissonance.
it is,
Uh,
and that's why I love the pyramids so much, is because for me, like, they were like a portal to go explore different philosophies, because coming from an engineering background, and I wasn't raised spiritual. I never even really had like tendencies to go explore that existential side of myself. But once I was studying like the ancient pyramids, like it was like a puzzle, and I was like, wait, we don't know how they did it. We don't know how they knew all of this information. We don't know how they were constructing the same types of pyramids in China, in Egypt, in Maya, in all these supposedly completely separate cultures. And once it became like an engineering puzzle to me of how they could even do it,
Yeah.
then it really allowed me to open my mind to like to their truth and to their philosophy and to their outlook on life. Because I was like, if we don't know how they were doing things, then why are we so quick, so arrogant, so quick to jump to dismiss it, to dismissing their entire teachings and their understandings and their education?
And in a world like the Western civilization that we are in, we put so much weight on science and mathematics, and yet these pyramids and the way that they're structured and all of these pieces of architecture that have been built are so perfectly mathematically made. But we want to dismiss that as well and say that, they were, they just happened to get lucky that it was aligned with this electrical line with the planet just perfectly so that it would hit,
There's
whatever.
a lot of weird coincidences too. They all align with Orion's belt, and they're
Right.
all like positioned the same. Like in China, Egypt, and Maya, all three of their main pyramids, like the Great Pyramids and then the
Wow.
Teotihuacan ones, they all have the same configuration of the three pyramids with the big one in the center, slightly offset. And yeah, it's a great puzzle. That is one of the things that I want to like harness with Pyramid Realm, is to not necessarily like, supply people with the answer, but to supply people with like the puzzle's still out there to solve. Like go solve it. We don't have all the answers, and that means that anyone with internet access they can suddenly like research up on quantum mechanics and educate themselves, but you can pick anything, like. And that's, I don't know, I'll go on some tangents about the age of information and how frustrating it is to be swamped with all of this information, but also like at a certain point, ignorance, it's willful because everything is
Yeah.
available to you if you really want to go look for it.
I agree. People don't really have excuses. That's a great point. And like you could solve, like people should be trying to solve the even simpler problem. Maybe it's even harder, who knows? Instead of how people built the pyramids, why did they build the pyramids universally? Like there's nothing that's not an obvious intuitive engineering design. If you can create big bricks, we create towers. That's the intuitive thing to do. Like there's absolutely no reason you turn that thing into a pyramid. It's not something that every engineer will just come into and conclude on their own.
And that was another one that just like it got me sucked in, was when they're like measuring the properties of the pyramids. Like there's a wave of new modern science that is basically confirming that like the relative dimensions of the Great Pyramids have these special properties that it helps work with whatever electromagnetic energy is in the air, and it helps like concentrate it. And I think, Elizabeth, you told me something about Napoleon traveling to the pyramid
Yeah, no, he took a venture with a lot of his men during his basically a tour. He went on a tour. He was kind of following Alexander the Great's pathway,
Got it.
and he made a stop in a pyramid. I can't remember which pyramid in Egypt, but he made a stop and stayed the night in there. And based on his literature that he had read, people were terrified to do it. They said that the experiences were unexplainable and to do it at your own risk. But Napoleon himself was a great person of esotericism as well as very
Yeah.
much an exotericism. Yeah, so he really wanted to know. Like he had done a lot of research on the Egyptians. That was definitely not out of someone who wants to rule the world. That's kind of the first step for anyone, is to look at the history of what other people say is unexplainable, the mysticism behind something, the hand behind the curtain. So he stayed in there, and he said that his meditation experience was insane. He said that he
Really?
was experiencing lots of weird like wah 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 sounds, and when he meditated, he just went immediately out of his body.
And
Um,
and I imagine they designed the pyramids with that intention. Like the
exactly.
pharaohs knew what they were doing. They designed these chambers because they wanted to go sit in the chambers and get charged up with like cosmic juju. You know,
And
that's
I think it's really great that nowadays, like you said earlier about the age of information where so much is at our fingertips, but those people who are willing to really tap into something like you, Deep, who is able to use that information and utilize into something that is very perpetually positive for our planet, you know, and
I
beyond it.
agree with that.
When you're able to do that, the the connections that you're able to make with what the ancients were trying to provide and preserve for us for a later time, those can now come to the forefront because now the technology and the insight that was necessary to get there is again, you know, is now able to make itself known and also make new progress that was never there before in new ways just because they probably had never experienced reality like we are right now.
Right, we might be on the you're actually that's very smart. Like we might actually be seeing the very emergence of that right now with the disclosure of the Pentagon UFO program. And the reason why I say that is consider the fact that we were probably seeing these machines 100 years ago, 200, 1,000 years ago, and back then we didn't have the scientific understanding or even frankly the ability to track these things as well, right? So the what I learned, you know, through my research and through my own, let's say, interesting connections with people in the intel community, I learned that there's been almost definitely an increase in UAP sightings, but it's not just that we can track them. There's truly just a number that's greater than there was, let's say, 70 years ago. Though there is something I'd personally say is a little bit disturbing about that, because the last time that we recorded an increase in UAP sightings was around the world wars. So I wonder if yeah if that has anything to do with it or if it's a
and
predictor of a war.
I think that's kind of a fun segue also of like, to talk about why do you think they're here? You know, I know there's a lot of theories out there. I think it's probably a little bit of everything, but do you think they're here now? Like, I think they've been here for a long time, but do you think that they're making their presence more felt because we've developed nuclear weapons and they're trying to monitor and make sure that we don't kind of destroy our own species as well as the
Possibly again
spare
So
our
for
so
the millionth time.
so I would turn that to Elizabeth. Here's why. Like I think I can answer your. Here's how I would answer your question, which is it depends on however Elizabeth answers this. So you have animals in your barn right now, right? Let's say, or like you mentioned a deer or whatever. Let's say those deers figured out how to create weapons that kill everybody in the barn. What are you gonna do? Like, how would you react to that?
You would definitely not only survey their progress, but you'd also sabotage their progress. You know,
Good point.
if they are putting everyone at risk, you're gonna stop it. You're gonna pull the plug out of their machine. You know, you're gonna do what you can to make sure that wherever they are in their collective consciousness to decide to make these things and the intent behind it, wherever that may be, wherever that evolution was, maybe we have a different perspective that may prove a little bit more healthy for the planet. So being able to have that discretion to
I think
to survey and to
So, but then
honestly
I would
not
ask you,
to
why have they
destroy.
not pulled the plug on our nukes? Because we have like 14,000 just cross Russia in the U.S.
Well,
But
apparently
they
they
do get
have.
tampered with. They get
Apparently
tampered.
they have before. There are stories back in Australia
Yeah.
where they had these red beams or something. I apologize for not having all the details, but they had these red beams and they were shooting them up, and something happened where the machine stopped working and it never worked again after they saw something fly across them in the sky.
Wow.
Um, so
yeah,
they
I also came across something at some point in my research that like we shot some tester nuke into
Yep,
space or something, and that
that's
like
been
3 UFOs came and circled it and deactivated it, and it landed
that's right.
on the ground. And so I think, like, at least for to answer my own question, I think it's kind of a game of balancing the evolution of our technology with the evolution of our consciousness and our spirituality, because we need
True.
to be.
Without ruining our free will. I truly believe
Yeah.
that our free will has been respected. Otherwise, we'd all be speaking alien right now.
No, I think there are certain cosmic rules that other species try to abide by, and I always try to like view the alien like phenomenon through the lens of human activity, in terms of like, okay, so we are constantly going into other ecosystems
Right.
and trying to do what like we think is right. You know, we don't always know, but we're trying to preserve their ecosystems. We're trying to save the pandas and whatnot. But then at the same time, like, there's some people out there that will go shoot a panda and try to sell its fur, you know? So it's complicated. And I think it's really easy for people to jump to certain conclusions based on very little evidence about the intentions of these ETs. And yeah, that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on, is to have a conversation about ETs and about what those relationships might be, that is less of this fear mongering, they're here to control us and destroy us and whatever. Like, I think if they were here to destroy us, they probably could have figured it out by now.
Right. I wholly agree with that. I mean, look at the technologies that we've tracked on record, right? You're looking at things that travel 33 to 88 times the speed of sound. For context, the International Space Station travels at 25 times the speed of sound around our Earth, right? In space. We have nothing that travels that fast in our atmospheres. So absolutely, like, they could destroy us within minutes. I don't question that for a second. I'm really interested. Yeah. So I think one indicator or hint is, I think, in our evolution. So if you've ever worked with genetic algorithms, like we use genetic algorithms all the time to solve very complex equations and find the answers really to these complex equations. So let's say I have I have an optimization function. I want to find the minimum of that function. You can do it two ways. You can use typical optimization techniques, or you could evolve your answer to get to the right point. And those are, those are evolutionary algorithms, genetic ones. And the cool thing is that when you look at the usefulness of genetic algorithms, they get to the right answer after tens of thousands of iterations, just for very simple problems. If you have a really, really complex problem, let's say I'll give you an example. Let's say you're trying to train a car virtually, right, in a video game, to avoid obstacles. It needs to become a self-driving car. And you're using reinforcement learning plus genetic algorithms to do it. So, right, it's constantly evolving every generation. That takes tens of millions of iterations, generations, really, to get to the optimal self-driving car. And that's a simple, narrow intelligence. So if you wanted to start from, let's say, the least common ancestor, which is the point at which humans were indistinguishable from other primates, when we were indistinguishable from monkeys and apes, that was about 8 to 12 million years ago. That leaves just over 500,000 generations in order to have gone from that least common ancestor to where we are now. So 500,000 is a fraction of the millions of genetic iterations that it takes just to get simple intelligence to do a self-driving car. So based on that same, argument, it should have taken us at least billions of generations to get to the level of intelligence that we're. Yeah, yet we're here in 500,000. How does that work? That just doesn't add up mathematically and computationally.
And that's something we see very consistently across ancient beliefs, is
and across humans, but no other animal.
Yes, that there was some intervention by otherworldly, godly, whatever beings that came. Especially the Sumerians even had in-depth knowledge about our DNA and the shape of it all, and yeah, that's something that I definitely resonate with very heavily, was that there was some type of genetic alterations in our ancient past to help evolve us into what we are right now, into what this society is and how advanced we are.
And I would argue that it would have to be continuing. Like the way that it works is you can't just alter the genes of a civilization once and let them go. You will likely see how it affected them, then you'll intervene again. You have to. You're kind of committed to. And so I wonder, is that happening now?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's
that's a great question.
when I hear like stories about UFO abductions and people's
Yeah.
experiences, it it aligns with that very well. Like the people that get abducted by these ET beings often report like they're getting their genetics run, they're getting tests done, and there's some people that like they'll have aliens abductions almost as like a in their family line. Like the
Right.
ETs are like tracking this one specific line of genetics and consistently abducting and running tests to kind of keep tabs on our progress.
Yeah, it's a great point. That was actually, the genetic part was one of the things that Dr. Gary Nolan, he's a scientist who he was a scientist on the Two Stars Academy board for a while, but he's worked on the paranormal. Like he's researched, for example, the genetics of experiencers, and he's tried to figure out, what is it about them that is different, that makes them have these experiences. And he found that there is something that's actually physically, like, you can detect this in the brain. It's called the caudate putamen, and he found that people who are experiencers have up to 9 to 27 times more connectivity in that part of the brain. And he found it consistently, so it's something that anybody can replicate. If you're, for example, if you're a neuroscientist or you have your MRIs, like, you can check. And I found that very interesting, because then he went deeper and he said, all right, so how does this work, right? And so one thing that's interesting is that when he had first detected it, he thought he had found white matter scarring in these MRI scans. But the thing about scarring is that it's totally unique to each person, right? No two scars are ever the same, whether it's on your skin or whether it's on your brain. But these people had the exact same signature or the same scarring. Then when he looked deeper, he saw that it isn't actually scarring. It's an increased density in neurons, which ended up being this caudate putamen area. So he looked at their genetics next, and their families, and whether their parents had the same signature. And he found, I think, over 80% of the people who had this brain signature, both their parents had it too. So it's generational in that sense. That's physically, provable, which is
I,
very interesting.
I have two questions for you.
Right. Yeah.
So first question, do you think that in our lifetime, so like I agree that there's been a continued kind of like monitoring and guiding of our evolutionary process. Do you think in our lifetime the next step in the human being is for us to take charge of our own evolution, like to start steering, like taking hold of the steering wheel of our own evolutionary track and pointing it in a certain direction? And then second question, do you think that there's been some effort from like other human timelines and future humans to influence this current reality and past realities to help, like, I don't know, almost like guarantee ideal timelines?
Yeah, those are very good questions. So the first one, yeah, the answer is yes. I absolutely think that we have a chance to, and we already are starting to take our
Mhm.
evolution to our own hands. So whether we like it or not, take China for example. They were the first people to alter a fetus, right? Like genetically alter it. So they've already opened the door for designer babies. Eventually, within our lifetime, for sure, we're going to be seeing designer babies, right? So in
My,
the sense,
my
yeah,
grandpa is actually a geneticist, so he was always telling me
that's
this,
awesome.
the research he was doing. He started his own company, but he was saying that, yeah, we basically now have the technology to be, like, build a baby workshop. If you really wanted, you could go in with your partner and be like, I want his eyes, her skin complexion, whatever, and just like, which is a whole moral dilemma in itself
It
to talk
is.
about. But
It
yeah.
is, and that's exactly what what I wanted to go into. So consider that we're managing our evolution, whether we like it or not, and another person who is, leading that is Elon. So consider that once we actually have neural links, and let's say they're useful and safe, more importantly, we have to manage that technology ethically. We have to make sure that people aren't trying to hack each other, that they're not trying, that the rich aren't just getting richer off this, that truly everybody's benefiting. And
And
let's say, yeah,
that's my main concern with Neuralink is like, okay, if we start, I have a couple concerns, but if we start developing technology that can basically, he's increasing the bandwidth of your mind or something along that lines through AI technology, like, a, how do you stop it from just immediately going to the wealthiest people in the civilization and then basically having them become like a class above of just like
Super race.
superhuman godly beings?
Yeah.
And then B, like, I personally, like, I don't understand the technology well enough to have a very like in-depth philosophical discussion about it on my end. But how do you guarantee that you're gonna retain sovereignty over your consciousness and that you're not susceptible to someone sending a program on some coding, and all of a sudden you're like walking around like a robot because you have Neuralink in your brain? You know,
Become a soldier
that's my
unwillingly.
it's my biggest
yeah,
fear, I think, is
yeah. Yeah, so I think both problems are solvable for what it's worth. And the solutions that I propose are, first of all, consider, to answer your question about how to prevent the rich from getting richer. Consider it might just be as simple as what happened with cell phones. So with cell phones, the first ones that came out, they went to the rich.
true.
Stood on the Matrix tail, and it was like, we gotta gotta shut this down.
He was. Did you hear that?
Yeah, he might be right.
We were getting too into it there. They said we need to halt this for a
Yeah,
second.
too much information.
We need to disconnect them from their flow real quick. It's getting too good. While Braden's figuring that out, I do want to say that I agree that I don't think that the wealthy getting certain technologies first is a bad thing. It has to start somewhere, and they're the ones who can afford it. I mean, technology is expensive, especially when it's first distributed, and
Yeah.
so that helps circulate it in the first place. So I definitely don't think that's a bad thing. But them getting certain genetic things first,
Yeah,
it's not upsetting, but it's definitely a cause for concern to see
it
how
just
they
needs
can
to be
then manipulate
regulated.
that.
Yep,
Yeah,
absolutely. Just
yeah,
hardcore regulations. Yeah, what's needed. And consider like Open AI, right? That was founded by a few people. Like Elon was the founder, but he left it because of conflict of interest. But ironically, Open AI has now created extremely powerful artificial intelligence systems that I'm positive are not being regulated properly. So like so yeah, we just need to up our game there without being too authoritarian, right? Because that's the other game
right.
that we're
Taking
playing.
away the free will of what we can do with what we have. So
Exactly.
how do you think the best way to regulate that would be?
I have a lot of faith in blockchain technology. So once you have like a really distributed ledger, and you know what everybody is doing at all times, where data is going and flowing, then you can quickly, shut it down. So if everybody agreed to develop, let's say on the blockchain, like their technologies, just for the sake of mankind, that could actually go a very long way.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. And I think it's a matter of integrity of who is kind of surveying all of this blockchain to begin with. Um, because in America, for example, we won't get too much into this, but um, for America, we say that we only have two parties basically, but that's not the case.
Mhm.
If we were to actually shift our votes
Yeah,
towards, the Green Party or Independent Party, for example,
yeah,
how much would integrity be the forefront of the government and of our laws? How much would that be put into new regulations um, and new bills that we'd place on this new technology? It's definitely something that I question, um, and I definitely don't want to say it worries me because it does not, but it definitely makes me wonder um, how we can use this new technology that is undoubtedly going to come out. Um, how, how we can use it to better the evolution of humanity to begin with, you know? Because we're doing it step by step. I mean, even our way of navigating through time and space with just a cell phone is exponential. But I think that the way that we can use new technology that's coming out, it's going to completely change the way that we perceive each other and ourselves. Um, and even especially with something like Neuralink. Brayden hung up on me, so I think maybe that means he's coming back in, but
Yep.
I'm not entirely sure. Although, oh, hey, hey.
Okay, I'm back in.
Hey, stop hating.
I had to go on my phone. My computer is tweaking out. There's just too much wisdom being spoken, and it couldn't handle it. But we did get the first half of the podcast, so we'll stitch it together in post. We were talking about just the distribution of the advanced technology that's coming, and where you guys see it going, and how we should manage it to the best of our ability while being realistic as well.
Well, the second part to that, to your question, was, you know, about the actual security, right? Like the actual privacy of the technology once it's distributed. How do you make sure that your mind hasn't been hacked, right? That's really the question on everybody's mind right now.
Because I tend to believe that for however someone is good at coding, there's always going to be someone that's equally good at hacking.
For sure, I agree wholly with you. But that doesn't mean though there's no solution. It does, despite that being counterintuitive. And the reason why I say that is because consider this: our brains are already encrypted right now. Like I can't read your thoughts, Brayden. You can't read mine, hopefully, right? So like, and why is that? It's because like we have physical hardware like blocking each other. Like
I know, Deep. If you start spending a little bit more time with me, I might be able to start reading your mind. You know.
Fair. I mean. So yeah, let's say like reading like even like subconscious thoughts and stuff, right? Every single neuronal link, it's just hard without we just have a natural protection, and that's the fact that our own brain has hardware that's not so easy to penetrate for now. But on top of that, it has its own unique algorithm for each person, right? Every person has a unique brain signature. So let's say that you capture that brain signature, you would know if that signature has been corrupted, if somebody is trying to break into it. So if you had this sort of intelligent defense system that's constantly adapting, but it's based on your intelligence, your brain imprint, then it just simply couldn't be hacked. Right now, the only way that it could be hacked, though, at that point, is if we all collectively decide to enter a hive mind-like state. But then that opens up different questions of personality and what is a person, frankly, and how would that change if we were all connected to each other, and should we even do it, of course.
Yes, all good questions.
There's very loaded questions there. There's so much we could talk about. And I honestly think that we could turn just the idea of AI blending with humanity into its own discussion, its own podcast, because it is such a loaded question. And I'm going to go back on the concern or the question of how you said that we won't know, or we will know if someone has kind of hacked into our body, right? Hacked into our mind or our subconscious.
Or even
AR, I'm sorry?
Or even attempted to. Yeah, we would know.
Yes, just triggering that activity and seeing that it's there. I think that, you know, there's so much right now where humanity doesn't even correlate subconscious gestures made in the present around them. They don't connect as deeply as they used to, or they're not resonating as deeply with their intuition, for example. So those things are now less prevalent of what protections we may have naturally a part of our body. So if there is a way that they could, they as in a very generalized spectrum of people who provide us with technologies and stuff like that, if there is a way that unintentionally or intentionally they could provide distractions that would somehow distort our perception even further. How that would then affect us if we then were to get tapped into something without knowing. And again, if there's something, the potential of something like Neuralink, which we were discussing earlier, were to trigger something, you have programs, mind programs like MK Ultra, for example, that you hear a word, you hear a sound, and it triggers you into something completely subconscious, and you have no idea you're even doing it. You are no longer that individual that you once were before those things were triggered in your brain and in your neural pathways. So if that were to happen with something similar to Neuralink, I'm not trying to demonize Neuralink or anything.
Okay.
I think that there is that potential where you could make, an extra 3 million soldiers without anyone knowing that they're about to go to war, and I think that discretion of knowing and surveying something like that should definitely be a concern for the people as they're evolving this technology forward.
Yeah, I think for me, with AI and Neuralink on the micro scale and the macro scale, it's like the AI is a tool. Like I don't think it's inherently good or evil, but for my own consciousness, if I, and that's why I don't mind like having all my AI stuff on a phone. Like we have all these AI things that help us and
Right.
Siri, and it's on my phone and I can put it down. And so it's like a tool for me. Like I'm the consciousness, I'm running the show.
Yeah.
And then I'm using AI like to help with logistical parts of my life that I don't want to deal with. Like that makes sense to me. That increases my quality of life. What I'm scared of is any situation in which both personally and also as a society, we're handing over control to AI, which is something that I could see happening. And that I think it would be it feels like a misuse of our it feels like there's something better that we could we need to form a healthier relationship with AI and be at least like have a very real conversation with the youth, with the people that are going to become this civilization about what we want to do, instead of kind of hiding behind it and avoiding these hard conversations because they're here and they're not going anywhere. AI isn't going anywhere. Elon isn't going anywhere. And so I think we need to decide as the younger generation, kind of what kind of relationship we want to build with AI and then work towards it.
Yeah, it's a very good point. It's why I was mentioning to Elizabeth about the importance of regulation and regulating who's developing AI as we speak right now, and just any of these future technologies that can rapidly affect the entire world in a negative or positive way. If you consider like adversarial neural networks, for example, the cool and scary thing about neural networks of today is that you can, if you understand the way that the mapping of that neural network is happening, how it maps pixels, how it maps images to a guess, right? Whether, like, let's say I have a neural network that is just an image detector, and it will tell me image recognition, and it'll tell me, there's a face here, there's a cat in this picture. The thing about those neural nets is that you can hack them easily. So and what I mean by that is that once you understand the mathematical formula of that neural network, you can just change a few pixels in an image and make it seem like it's seeing something totally different, because all you did was you changed the mathematical result that it came to, right? Because you know how it's making those calculations. Mm-hmm. So a really famous example of that is with self-driving cars. The first ones that were rolled out with their algorithms, you could put like a sticker on a stop sign, and the sticker would look like nonsense to a human. It's just a random sticker on a stop sign, but that's enough to convince like a car that it's seeing a dog, or like it says go instead of stop. So that's problematic, right? Because people will exploit that and they are starting to exploit it. So then you get into this AI arms race where like the developers now have to take that into account, and they are, and you just play this cat and mouse sort of game. And so what you were getting at, Braden, was how do we avoid that with, let's say, our security systems, right? Our Neuralink relation and whatnot. And part of that, I think, will be a lot of the problems that we're talking about right now are stemming from the inherent separation of humans and the artificial separation. Like we have countries. I don't mean to sound globalist, but like the problem is that you have people. We have an us versus them mentality. It's not like we act like one civilization that just
Yeah.
wants the best for each other. We just don't do that. If we did, we wouldn't even need to worry about these problems. So maybe our solution won't even come from technology. It'll come from like true spiritual evolution.
Deep, you bring up a huge point of the social evolution of a people, of a species, and
Yeah.
how we can. I'm going to blend in what Braden said as well, with seeing technology as a tool. When we can use that as a tool and not some form of codependency,
Right.
beyond just convenience of making our lives have a higher quality of life.
Good point.
When we unite in a social evolution, um, the possibilities of where we can take these tools can reach new ways that were originally completely impossible. They were actually impossible. Those timelines could not perpetuate because of certain foundations that were set at the beginning. And when we, and I do think that there is a huge awakening happening right now. And when we can tap into that and use those people to use each other in the best way possible to then like unite, that
Yeah.
technology now has way more pathways to be something incredible than it ever did before.
And we
Yeah,
might. Sorry. Yeah. Go for Braden.
I think the automated cars is an interesting conversation too, because it brings up for me again like what progress really is. Because like personally,
Yeah.
like one of my favorite things to do on this planet is
Yeah.
drive my car.
Nice.
Like it's like the 20 minutes it takes to get to the beach or whatever, like those moments where I'm driving my car is like I feel so alive, like I feel so in my body and present. And like so personally, like in my best life, like I don't want to get in the back seat of my car and say what like whatever and then have it show up in 30 minutes, you know? And I think that's like I'm not alone. I think a lot of people feel that way, but another group of people I'm sure would love to have full automation and not have to deal with driving. So it's just a matter of trying to please as many people as you can while preserving.
If you're too old and you can't drive, then they get first pick for automatic driving. Because even back in the early 1900s, you had Ford Model Ts coming out, and all of these people thought it was incredibly convenient. But then all of these city people were like, man, you know, I love being able to walk where I'm going. I see where this is evolving. Everyone's going to have one of these automatic carriages soon enough. And once that happens, the aliveness that, you know, the mobility provides me walking to where I want to go is now going to be missing. But
Right.
I feel that that substitution of what they were wanting was eventually found in something else, but it never took away the quality of that original transportation ability.
Yep.
In fact, I think it made it higher. But I'm going to go back to me talking about old people getting first pick to automatic cars, because they need it most. You know, they don't want to depend on all these other people for them to live their independent life just because their biological vessel is now failing them so that they can't do these things to live an independent world. It's unfair, really, you know, that they're about to leave this planet and they don't get as much left, you know.
Yeah.
So it would be great for them to somehow get a first come first serve, first in first out kind of rule.
Yeah, I think I like that policy. It's a good one. And also, old people have gone through that same psychology that Braden currently has, which is I'm gonna miss X lifestyle because of this technology. Like consider like not to single you out, Braden, but consider like books, right? And how we moved to the internet. Like people were saying the exact same thing. I'm going to miss books, but they never went away.
Yeah, and that's what's cool. Is like I've always been kind of I like the classics. You know, I
Nice.
don't have an Apple Watch. I like
Classy
a
man.
watch that has like a circle and a little like dial that goes
Right on.
around to tell the time. Yeah, that's just me, and that's my truth. And I think it's cool that we're building out this world. And I agree. Like, I will always be someone that buys a physical book
Right.
and flips through the pages. But it, like, the internet is still an amazing thing, and Kindles are still amazing. You can have like 500 books in your pocket or something. It's not about demonizing the progress of technology and all the benefits that come with it. It's about, like, for me, I feel like we're all on this like personal mission to find what is meaningful in life. Like, that is like our duty to humanity, is to like live our life and to identify the things that give meaning to life to us. And we are like a little like one like sensor in the mass consciousness of humanity. And so like by like people like Elon Musk are doing that in their own way, you know, like he finds great meaning in like developing these technologies and
Right.
and integrating himself with them. And like it's definitely not, I don't think it's a negative thing. I love, like, yeah, there's so much hypocrisy out there when you go down the route of like hating technology because you're tweeting about it on your iPhone and you have a
Right.
MacBook, you know. So, and I love my car, you know, so it's not just about romanticizing the past and like forever longing for like what was more real, you know.
Yeah, that's
It's life
brilliantly
is just
said.
as real now.
And also it having different variants of a preference for all these different people who have their own preferences, that free will ability alone is something that makes the future so wonderful. Is because if you don't want to get an Apple Watch, you can keep your original watch. You know, if you don't
True.
want an automatic car, you will have the ability to choose that for yourself. Um,
And
you
I
know,
don't
one
think
can hope.
that'll ever change. Like, that is an intrinsic human thing. Like, we'll never
Yeah.
give that up in no society. And when people have tried that, it's always failed. So
The liberty of society of being able to have different outlets of expression, um, of, you know, artistic expression, philosophical expression, religious expression, technological expression. When we're able to tap into a wide spectrum, the spectrum will only get bigger of what's possible. So it excites me knowing that I'm living at a time where it's in a constant transition of adding more to that spectrum.
totally.
Yeah,
And
I saw a tweet the other day that like it was something along the lines of like, what better time to live than on the cusp of revolution, you
That's
know, like.
awesome.
And I totally agree, because we have all this nuance coming into our lives, and all this, like, the exponential growth of technology is something that's really like miraculous to witness, you know. Like, I'm in awe by nature and earth, but I'm also in awe by like what we are able to come up with, you
Totally.
know, and what we're able to create, you know. So yeah, it's a beautiful world, and you experience what you choose to focus your energy on. So I try to
Right
stay
on.
positive while still advocating for some reconnection with our roots, because I think that's part of what the future is. I think kind of like the Fibonacci sequence of growth is that you add the previous number to the current number to get the future number. And I think that's what we're witnessing with the rise of quantum mechanics too. And all the, like, quantum mechanics aligns very, very closely with the Buddhist worldview and a lot of these ancient truths that are coming together, like reminding us that we're all interconnected. And I think that that's that moment in history we're in right
Right.
now, is we're like reconnecting with our ancient history, blending it all with modern technology and modern sciences and the culture too. And then we're witnessing that all being born right now, and it's cool to be a part of it.
very cool. And if you look at different periods of time where a society did choose to look
Right, guys.
back
We
and
are back.
use,
Someone's at the door. My bad.
okay, when someone uses the ancient history of their past and then puts it into their modern day. I mean, I think about in the 1920s, there was a huge surge in Egypt. They started thinking about Egypt a lot more, and that changed their perception of reality. You take a look in the late 1900s, in the mid 1800s, you have people like Madame Helena Blavatsky, and you have people like Tesla coming into the planet. These people revolutionized how we understand reality. And that was because they were taking ancient knowledge and bringing it back into the modern world. And we're in a point like that again. And it's incredible to know that we are part of the reason why it's resurging, and knowing
Yeah.
that we are now the golden hands that are moving it forward to see what we can do with it, knowing that we're responsible.
And Tesla actually totally predicted everything that's happening. He has a quote somewhere that he said, like at the beginning of the 21st century, robotics will take the place that was once occupied by slave labor.
Wow.
And that's like, it's so fascinating because it's true. And I think it demonstrates the positive sides of technology. Like as a civilization, we've constantly been struggling to, like, there's a lot of like work that isn't necessarily fun that needs to be done to like push us forward and evolve as a species. And at different stages, like, it's looked different. We've enslaved people, we've had indentured servitude, whatever. And if we can move into a world where we free people with technology, like, that's what we should be aiming to do, at least from the pyramid realm point of view. Like, we should be shooting to use all the technology that we have, and then to kind of build towards this common vision that involves freedom for people. And one of the things that has to happen is we have to address a lot of cognitive dissonance about what people view as progress. Because, like, something like unemployment, like, people talk about unemployment all day long, about how, oh, it's horrible that there's 10% unemployment, whatever. But, like, how many people like their jobs?
Not
you
many.
know like like people
Not
are like,
many.
oh, like, everyone needs a job, and then everyone goes to the job. Most people don't even like their job. We don't, like, we're going to enter a world where we don't need cashiers, we don't need truck drivers. And, like, it's scary in some aspects because these people are going to be displaced and they're going to lose their job, their livelihood. But from a much, like, more cosmic, grand scale, like, we're leveling up as a species into a higher civilization.
And
We
also
are.
creating new jobs for those same people, for something else that they have built a strength in doing those jobs for so long. It would just be a new way to evolve our economy.
Exactly. I mean, the whole idea of like universal basic income, for example, it'll be sustainable even more once we've automated these like monotonous jobs.
Yes.
So
And I've been an advocate for UBI for a while now, and
nice.
because I don't see it as a government handout to lazy, like,
Yeah.
like we like, I think you undersell people's contribution to society when you view it like that. Because I think if people had money to spend,
Yeah,
and you freed up their time, like, I think inevitably they would start to pursue what they're truly passionate about.
exactly.
Which is, like, the greatest thing that we could do for our civilization, is to free people to go and to give them the money and the resources to go pursue their passions, because that's when they're going to have the greatest positive overall impact on society, which is, it benefits all of us,
And the
like,
results speak for themselves. I mean, right now, we're using electromagnetism, right? Alternating current. All of those things are possible thanks to one Serbian who pursued his passions. That was all he was doing,
yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
It only
Tesla,
takes one.
yeah.
It only
Tesla,
takes one
like,
to really commit.
True enough.
he was someone that I have just, like, an enormous amount of respect for, because I realized, like, in studying his behavior, like, this is something that
Yeah.
I do a lot, is I look at politicians, I look at tech moguls, whatever. And I study their behavior, and from that, I infer their intentions. You know,
Nice.
like I skip the words, I watch what they do and where their energy goes, and I, like, from that, I'm able to decide what they really care about. And Tesla was someone who, like, everything he did, it was all about the progress of humanity.
Right on.
Like,
Yeah.
everything. Like, he didn't even care if people infringed on his patents.
Uh-huh.
He had a quote where he's like, yeah, like, use my patents. Everything I'm developing is ultimately for, like, the betterment of this species, this civilization. So you building on top of my patents only furthers my work. You know, he had this very inclusive mindset that I think it opened my mind, just that some people think like that at all. You know, like that's
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 awesome.
that's like angelic to me, what he did, that he came onto this earth and then he died broke, and he spent his entire life just trying to develop technologies that would help free humanity and increase our quality of life. And he did a lot of cool stuff that I think that's another wave of disclosure that I think people are going to be like, whoa, is some of the technology that he developed. He had, like, him and Einstein worked on an invisibility cloak. Have you heard about that?
I didn't know about that. No.
They managed to, like, completely cloak a ship, and they had a bunch of problems where, like, the sailors and whatnot that were in the ship had health concerns afterwards, but they were able to, like, develop the stuff you see on TV, like Marvel type stuff, where the ship just looks like it's completely translucent.
That's interesting. Dang. Yeah, I'll look into that.
Yeah,
I never knew
I'll
that.
fact check that before I throw it on the podcast, but I'm like,
Sure.
I read it in a book, so I'm pretty sure it's legit.
Well, well. Interestingly enough, they hated each other. I mean,
They did.
yeah, they were constantly beefing. Tesla. It was more Tesla than Einstein. Einstein was like passive about it, but like Tesla's famous for saying this. He said that relativity is a beggar in good clothing or something. Like he was.
I remember this.
Right. So
Yeah.
so
I
I
also
would be
remember
surprised if they actually managed to collaborate. Like that would be news to me.
I remember there's some quote somewhere where someone was interviewing Einstein, and they asked him, like,
Yeah,
how does it feel to be the smartest person on earth or
and he
something?
says sarcastically, yeah.
And he's like, you'd have to ask Nikola Tesla if you really
Yeah.
wanted to know.
Yeah, exactly. And it all comes from like, yeah, them beefing. It was just banter, but to science, like
No, some things
super
don't
science.
change. Scientists, I think Tesla liked Einstein more than he probably liked Edison by the end.
Totally, yeah. Oh, that's for sure.
All
And
right, well,
Tesla did say one thing though that is absolutely going to come true, I think, in this decade. He said that the day science studies the immaterial,
yes,
you know that?
non-physical phenomenon.
Yeah,
It will make more progress in one century than in, like, the previous millennia or something.
Exactly. And that could be happening now, right? Like we're kind of entering that era of studying the immaterial. I consider parts of quantum mechanics studying the immaterial, but then
Yes.
also the idea of studying UAPs. There seems to be this immaterial aspect of it, and then
Yes.
who knows what spirituality scientifically will bring us. So
Yes, I think that's an awesome place to call it. But we will definitely have you back on our podcast, Deep. This was a pleasure.
awesome, brother. Yeah, thanks guys. This was super fun. It was like
Yeah,
a
we'll
nice
do it
break
again.
from my like normal work. So I'm really happy I enjoyed this.
Yeah, if you ever need a space to rant for 2 hours about UFOs and aliens, give me a call and we'll set up another podcast.
I will hold you to it, brother. That's awesome.
Yeah, I would love in our next podcast to talk about particular aircraft that you think the technology, where that's going, and what you've seen so far within that.
Oh, that would be fun.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it's
Thank
awesome.
you
Well,
again, Deep.
thank you everyone for
Thanks, guys.
tuning in. Thank you, Deep, for coming on, and we will see you next week.
Awesome. Cheers, guys.